Review and teardown time. This is the Aneng M127 Multimeter. I got it off Alixpress for about $9 American. This is a two-part video. The first part is actually looking at the meter's performance, and if you're more interested in silicon teardowns, that's the second half of the video. I'll tear the whole meter apart. The M127 caught my eye because not only is it an auto-ranging multimeter, it's actually an auto measurement meter. It decides what you're trying to measure. You put a voltage into it, displays the voltage. You put a resistance into it, well, resistance of course. You can see, of course, there's only two jacks here. The meter is only capable of voltage and resistance measurements. It is not capable of doing any current measurements. It's also got a field probe here for looking at AC lines. You can put this next to a wire and it'll detect whether there's AC electricity onto it. Obviously pretty handy if you're trying to see if wiring's live. Another interesting feature on this one, it actually has a built-in flashlight. So kind of handy. This is the kind of thing you'd probably put into your car or your boat or something if you're trying to make some measurements, or handy around the house. It's not really like a lab meter. It's much more meant for, I think, utility, which of course is a very good market. It's a small little meter, a little package here. If I compare it to, say, a more traditional meter like this Fluke, you can see much larger. So definitely just throw this thing into your car and keep it handy. Let's take a look at the performance of it. First, let's see if it meets its specifications for accuracy. So I have a little standard that allows me to quickly check whether things are reasonably plausible. It's got 3 resistors on it in decade movements, so and they're quite precise. 1 kilo-ohm. I measured 998 ohms, that's 0.3% low, and of course the accuracy the meter specifies is plus or minus 1%, so within accuracy. And likewise for the 10 kilo-ohm resistor and the 100 kilo-ohm resistor. The only thing of note is as the resistance gets higher, the accuracy seems to get better. That's probably a side effect of the fact this is an auto-ranging and auto-measuring meter. There's no way to zero it, so as you get into lower resistances, there's no auto-zero. The other thing the meter has is a fairly precise voltage reference source. It's like 5.0000 or something. And I'm measuring 5.06, which is 1.2%, which you would think is too high, out of spec. But multimeters always have this funny language. It's accuracy plus a number of counts sometimes. So, and within what they describe, the +5 counts, the meter is actually delivering the accuracy it promised. So I have the meter in NCV mode. It's basically looking for an electric field around a wire, AC wire. And you can see, of course, it beeps when there is power detected, which is a handy thing if you want to quickly check if there's a live circuit. So this is a true RMS meter, so I have this thing connected to a signal generator, and right now I have it at 20 volts peak to peak, and it's saying 7.08 volts, which is correct. 20 volts peak to peak RMS should be 7.07, so pretty good at 1800 hertz. If I come up to about 2400 hertz, I recall 2300, 2400 hertz, it starts to become inaccurate. So that actually is quite good. If I change the waveform to a square wave, this should be at 10 volts peak to peak, and you can see quite inaccurate. And even if I was to reduce the frequency downwards, perhaps to about 1000 hertz, it's still inaccurate. Come down to 700 hertz, it gets a little more accurate, but that should be 10. So the VMRS, it only seems to work well for sine waves. Same thing with triangle wave. Triangle wave should have a 20 volts peak to peak. Should also read a 5.77. It's not bad actually, 5.8, but it's not nearly as accurate as it is for a sine wave. So, but there you go. RMS used to be a real special feature in meters. I actually paid a lot of money for it, but as technology improved, it becomes a more standard offering. This actually isn't doing too bad. 300 hertz, you can see it's reasonably good. It should be 5.77. It's reading 585. If I come up again, it's about 2000 hertz. It starts to fall off, which isn't bad actually for certainly an inexpensive meter. So VMRS seems to work and certainly seems to be quite accurate when you have it in the sine wave mode all the way up about 2400 hertz. Okay, well, as an inexpensive meter, it seems to be working reasonably well, especially for the money. Let's tear it down. Let's look at safety. They come with some very thin leads. There's no UL or CSA markings on this meter here. Not a huge surprise, perhaps. The CE mark, but unfortunately a very debased standard. And then, of course, let's take the silicon apart and see how it's constructed. So back removed, and obviously we can see a circuit board with very few components on it, and that's of course why the meter is so inexpensive. If we start on the right hand side and look at the probe input for the voltage, it goes to this array of resistors. Let's just zoom in so it's a little bit easier to sort down what we're looking at. There are 3 arrays, they're all in series. There's this bottom array here, this array here, and this array here. Now the bottom array is essentially a 10 megohm resistor. There's 4 25 megohms in series. The reason why they didn't put down just simply one single 10 megohm resistor is the fact the working voltage of a 1206 package is around 200 volts. The meter is rated for 600 volt operation, so by putting them in series, they keep the voltage across each resistor below its operating limit. Now, the reason why there's 3 arrays, of course, is as you put different voltages into a multimeter, the A to D converter would have an incredibly wide range to try to sort down. So if you break it up like this and provide it 3 arrays, and there's going to be some sort of download precision resistor of some sort or here, these all create different voltages, and as it auto ranges, it can sort that down. The part on the upper portion is a buzzer for continuity. Looks like there's a transistor here that's controlled by the integrated circuit. Comes up here into the buzzer, and then it looks like there's a current limiting resistor which goes essentially to the battery of the assembly. The probe for measuring if there's a near field on the AC lines is just simply a chunk of wire. Comes down to a resistive divider here. Excuse my cursor. It comes into a resistive divider here, then it goes off into the integrated circuit. There's probably an amplifier sitting there. The little flashlight is just simply an LED. And looks like this connector here is, of course, suggesting there's a microprocessor of some sort up here, which makes a lot of sense. These aren't very precise resistors, and the reason why meters have become so cheap is what you do is you put down reasonable components on the meter for measurements. Then in the factory you provide very precise voltages and currents, and then what you of course can do is program in an offset with this field here, drop a new program in, put the offset values in and calibrate the meter, and off you go. It's a great way of going about it. Of course, all the interesting stuff is in here under this black epoxy, this integrated circuit. Let's take that off next and see what's on it. But before we do that, we'll just flip the board over to show that there's really not much else going on in this assembly. So here's the back side. Simply, of course, some LAN patterns for the push buttons and some LAN patterns for the LCD, and quite frankly not much else. Okay, let's take a look at the integrated circuit on this assembly under that black epoxy. If you dissolve the epoxy, you can see the actual integrated circuit. A very pretty picture. It's basically divided into 2. There's obviously some sort of digital section sitting on the left-hand side of the chip, and the analog section sitting on the right. However, to sort down this, let's see if we can first find the manufacturer's mark. On one corner of the die, we can see SDIC, which translates to a company that's based in China, Guangzhou. Again, set up about 20 years ago. The part number on the assembly is an IC 0815B. That doesn't trace to any part number on their website, but the closest datasheet they show is something called the SD7500. And if you take a look at the datasheet, you can see the digital section sitting here. An 8-bit RISC processor with 16 kilobytes of one-time programmable, 256 bytes of RAM, and let us highlight those here. It's the RAM's down here, the ROM's here, and of course logic here. The ROM is one-time programmable, which of course allows the vendor to put the program into it, and I suspect they probably burn in the calibration values at the same time. So in the digital section here, there's the microprocessor, and the process load looks fairly large, and what I mean by that is if you try to measure what's known as the gate length, which is basically this distance here, you get something called the process node. And that's relatively easy to do on modest process nodes. I have a calibration slide here, and so I can calibrate my microscope. And I know that the field of view here with this particular objective is around 115 micrometers. If you zoom in here, what you're seeing is the actual diffusion wells of the semiconductors. You can see, of course, we're at the edge of the ability of an optical microscope, but I suspect the process node of this particular semiconductor is around 100 to 300 micrometers, which is entirely appropriate because this is a battery-powered product. Large process nodes means less leakage, and the processor itself only needs to run in the tens of megahertz. All right, let's look at the input for the analog signal and it gets converted to a digital signal. There are 6 inputs on this chip here. I don't think they're all used in this assembly, but we saw 3 voltage divider arrays here. There's going to be a mux, and then they have something called a sigma delta converter. And if we go to the chip and then superimpose where those lines are, they're up here, and they correspond to these pins here. And if we just zoom in, we'll see that the mux probably sits here. Now this here is actually a resistor. It's made out of polysilicon. If you recall, in the outside assembly, we saw some resistor arrays which were made of an array of resistors for voltage reasons. But then, of course, to create a voltage you can measure, you have to have something in the interior. And basically, that's this resistor here. It forms the bottom leg of the resistive divider. And that will then go into a sigma delta ADD converter, which probably sits here. This is an array of capacitors. Looks like there's some FET structures below here, and there's some resistors here, and here, and then down here. To remind ourselves the complexity of the sigma delta converter, basically it's a comparator, an integrator, and a flip-flop. So you can see that to do integration you need a fairly substantive capacitor, and that's most likely this capacitor here. And then there's a comparator and some digital logic. And if we zoom into a magnified version of the strip metal portion of that, we can see that. This picture here is what I believe to the bottom of the sigma delta converter. Up here is where the capacitors were. They've been stripped away by the acid. Likewise, there was a resistor here, but the polysilicon's been dissolved. But you can see a smattering of what would be a digital section down here, some gates. That's the output probably of the ADD converter, which is simply a flip-flop. And then here, of course, we can see some FET structures, which are probably the outputs of the op-amps or comparators. All right, well, that was the Aneng M127 Multimeter. Actually better than I thought it would be, quite frankly. Really good example of a modern multimeter and how the cost gets driven out by using clever semiconductor process. If you enjoyed that video, I would certainly appreciate a thumbs up, and we'll see you on the next one.